Winter finishing is a high-cost production system that tends to operate in a very low margin. Therefore, it is essential that a maximum level of efficiency is achieved within the farm gate. In this section, we're going to look at firstly the importance of having your animals healthy at the start of the feeding period, then selecting the right type of cattle for feeding and feeding them the right type of ration. Finally, we'll discuss the economic importance of slaughtering cattle at the correct fat score. Having your cattle healthy at housing is essential to ensuring high levels of live weight gain are achieved. The key conditions to treat cattle for at housing are gut and lungworm, fluke and lice. Where there is any doubt over the course of treatment required, you should always consult with your veterinary surgeon. Worm treatment will depend on your production system. Where cattle have been grazed over the summer, you should bring them in and treat them with an ivermectin-based product 2 weeks before housing. This will ensure the animal's lungs are in a healthy condition prior to housing. Where cattle have been bought in the mart, you need to act a little bit more cautiously. Use a levamisole-based product first, followed by a second treatment with an ivermectin-based product 7 to 10 days later. At farm level, this has been shown to give a much slower worm kill in heavily infected animals, therefore reducing stress levels. Where stock have been purchased from marts around the country, a fluke treatment is essential. When slaughtering cattle, you should always ask your factory to give you a liver report detailing the level of fluke infestation. Use this information in consultation with your vet to decide on the best course of treatment. Remember, even when feeding the best quality ration, animals infected with fluke will not perform efficiently. Wait until the shed is full before treating animals for lice. The reason being that reinfection can quickly occur when treated animals come in contact with untreated animals. Therefore, the plan should be fill the shed, treat the entire shed, and then allow no more stock into that shed. You should also continuously monitor cattle during the housing period for signs of reinfection. Some telltale signs to look out for are cattle scratching, generally irritated, and loss of hair. Remember, it is important that you record all treatments in your animal remedies book and that all withdrawal dates are adhered to. To avoid running into health problems, try to minimise stress levels at housing. Try to avoid housing cattle on a wet day. You want to have your cattle coming into the house dry. Good air circulation is also important. You should aim to have plenty of air going over the animals' backs, but ensuring that they can also lie draft free. Water is vital, especially when feeding high dry matter diets. In the case where animals are being fed ad lib ration, they must have access to fresh running water at all times. Therefore, water troughs should be checked regularly. If for any reason the water supply is disrupted, meals must be removed from the diet immediately. Selecting the right cattle for slaughter is key to ensuring high levels of animal performance. On the majority of farms there will be bulls, steers and heifers going into the shed. In the case of steers and heifers you need to be very conscious of target slaughter date. Heifers will perform well up to 60 to 80 days in an intensive diet. After that performance will start to decline. The steer will perform well up to 90 days. Bulls are slightly different in that depending on the quality of the animal, they'll continue to perform well in an intensive diet up to 150 to 180 days. It is therefore critical at the start of the housing period you identify, group and feed cattle according to target slaughter date. Animals which at housing require 60 to 120 kilos of gain to reach target slaughter weight should be built up onto an intensive finishing diet right away. However, younger animals which may require up to 200 kilos of live weight gain to reach their target slaughter weight should be allowed to grow for 60 to 70 days before moving on to the intensive finishing diet. Where you've grazed animals over the summer, you should go through your stock in late August, early September and identify the smaller, buttier type animals that can be finished off grass without the need for that second winter. These animals should be removed from the group and fed meals for 3 to 6 weeks before slaughter. The scale of your finishing operation will determine how you buy your ration and indeed the products that you feed. The larger units will be buying straights, whereas the smaller units will be buying mixed rations directly from their merchant. No matter what way you're buying your ration, it's important that you get value for money. When buying in a ration, don't assess quality on protein alone. Research has shown that a 10 to 12% protein ration is more than adequate for finishing steers, heifers and older bulls. Energy is much more important in a finishing ration than protein. The key ingredients driving the energy content of your ration are maize meal, rolled barley and rolled wheat. If you do intend feeding a standard ration ad lib, ask your merchant to reduce the mineral inclusion rate down from 2% back down to 1%. Giving prescriptive advice in ration formulation is practically impossible due to the large variation in straight prices year on year. What may represent good value for money one year need not necessarily be good value for money the second year. Therefore, it is important that we understand how to calculate the relative feed value of various feed ingredients. In terms of relative feed value, 1 kilo of rolled barley is worth the equivalent of about 0.96 of a kilo of maize meal. So every 1 kilo an animal eats of rolled barley, to get the same level of energy, he has to eat 0.96 of a kilo of maize meal. If we move on here to crimp wheat, because there's a lot more moisture obviously in the product, for every 1 kilo of rolled barley the animal eats, it has to eat about 1.35 kilos of crimp. Obviously, every kilo it takes in of crimp, there's a lot more water in there. In terms of fodder beet here, very good feed for finishing cattle, high energy but also high level of moisture. So for every 1 kilo of rolled barley an animal eats, it needs to eat 4.5 to 5 kilos of fodder beet. If this was sugar beet, because sugar beet is slightly higher in dry matter and has a higher energy level, you're looking at, for every 1 kilo of rolled barley, 4 to 4.5 kilos of sugar beet. Moving on to maize silage, a product that's certainly grown in popularity and a very good product for finishing cattle. Maize, high levels of starch, high dry matter. Again, you're looking at 4.5 kilos of maize to every 1 kilo of barley. Finishing up here with grass silage, probably one of the most commonly used products in the finishing diet. For every 1 kilo of rolled barley an animal eats, it needs to eat 6 to 7 kilos of grass silage. So what does this tell us? Well, if we take rolled barley as our baseline at €100 a tonne, we can afford to pay 14 to 16 euros a tonne for good grass silage, 20 to 22 euros a tonne for good quality maize silage, 20 to 22 euros a tonne for fodder beet after processing costs, 25 euro a tonne if it was sugar beet, 75 to 76 euros a tonne for crimp, and 105 to 106 euros a tonne for maize meal. When it comes to protein, soybean meal is your Rolls-Royce product. It has a protein content of 48% and in terms of energy is relative to rolled barley. Other protein sources are rapeseed meal at 38% protein, maize distillers at 28% protein and corn gluten at 22% protein. Formulating a ration is a bit like mixing mortar. You need the right balance of sand, cement and water. Formulating your ration is exactly the same, and you need the right balance of energy, protein and finally fibre. The main sources of fibre in the market are citrus pulp, soya hulls and sugar beet pulp. Straw is another good source of fibre, though be careful not to overfeed it. It should be included in the ration at a rate of about 0.5 to 1 kilo per head per day. When mixing your own ration, it's important you don't forget to include minerals. The type of mineral you require will depend on the type of feed you're feeding the cattle. If you're feeding a standard cereal-based diet with silage or straw, a standard dry stock mineral will do. However, where you're feeding high levels of maize or beet, you will need to include a high phosphorus mineral. Minerals should be included at a rate of 100 grams per head per day and either can be mixed through the diet feeder or simply sprinkled over the silage. Marketing cattle at the correct condition score is a vital part of the profit equation. It's important to realise that not all the cattle in the shed or indeed the pen will come fit for slaughter at the same time. Therefore, to make sure that you're not overfeeding cattle, you want to continuously go through your shed and identify the cattle that are fit for slaughter. The ideal fat score to slaughter an animal out of the shed is fat class 3/4L, like this guy here beside me. When an animal starts going beyond fat class 4L, he starts to become very inefficient at converting feed into live weight gain. As a rough rule of thumb, it takes 3 times more energy to put on 1 kilo of fat as it does 1 kilo of meat. Therefore, in simple terms, an animal going from a fat class 2 to a fat class 3 requires this amount of meal, yet an animal going from a fat class 4L to a fat class 4H requires this amount of meal to put on 1 kilo of live weight gain. What have we learned? Well, one thing's for sure, there's a lot to winter finishing. Guys, the key things to get right is 1, at the start of the housing period, have your cattle healthy. 2, group them and feed them according to the target slaughter date. 3, make sure you get the ration right. Remember, energy in a finishing ration is much more important than protein. And finally, there's no point in getting everything else right if you don't market your cattle when they come fit for slaughter. Ideal fat score for cattle out of the shed, fat class 3, 4F.